Hey guys, Butterlord here. This is a bit of a different video. Um, this is just an unscripted rant video about something I really care about. It's something that's been a part of my life since I was about 3 or 4 years old, and it kind of hurts me to see it go in the direction it's currently going. And hopefully, learning it can learn from something that I also like. That also kind of pulled itself out of a bad hole, and that is Monster Jam, and how Monster Jam can learn quite a bit from NASCAR. I know there's already a lot of these types of videos and rants about Monster Jam and its steady decline over the past 5 or so years, mainly starting like 2017, 2018. And I will be talking about that, of course, but I'll also be talking about a little bit of the history of monster trucks. Not going to go too much into detail. There's a really good video by Donut Media, which I'll link in the description or in the top corner in, with the eye, about the whole history of monster trucks. It goes into a lot more detail than I'm going to go into in this video. But then I also give out my own solutions to said problems. I'll point out the problems, give my own solutions, and kind of paint a picture of a good timeline or a good future, a good alternate universe, or whatever you want to call it, about how I would fix Monster Jam if I was an all god emperor of Monster Jam. To quote Slapshoes in his NASCAR schedule video. One of my big inspirations as well. So, and I'll also talk about how Monster Jam can learn from NASCAR. Speaking of which, I'll talk about how Monster Jam learns from NASCAR or can learn from NASCAR. And actually, over these past few weeks, of time of day, October 21st, 2023, how Monster Jam actually seems to be improving slowly but surely. And I'll give a good little glimmer of hope. There's a glimmer of hope for Monster Jam. It's not going to be all dark yet. So I'll give my insight on that. I'll give my own opinion on that as well. In 1982, in Columbia, Missouri, Bob Chandler did the first ever car crush. It was Ford F-250, which he named Bigfoot. And that basically set the precedence of monster trucks throughout the 80s. Basically, these big, super heavy monster trucks that would just crush cars in arenas as a little sideshow. So you would come for like mud drag racing or something, and then monster trucks would be onto the side. And that's how it initially started. A very, very humble beginning for this soon to be really popular motorsport. I will leave in the description a series of videos about monster trucks in the 80s. It's a whole playlist. I highly recommend checking out if you're interested in this era of monster trucks. And it's especially really nice to see like old footage of any old sport, of any sport, but especially something like monster trucks, where it didn't happen so long ago where the quality is really, really bad. It's actually preserved relatively well because it was, like I said before, it was in the 80s, so camcorders were just around the corner. Like at least the smaller camcorders were just around the corner, and everyone had, it was a lot easier to get film than it was, say, in the 50s or 40s. As the 80s went on, it led to drag races between the trucks in those said stadiums, and it became its own certain event. So it would be these big, super heavy monster trucks going against each other in essentially drag races. And as the 90s came around, in 1991, the Penda Point series came to fruition. And that was, for the time, all throughout the 90s, it was the biggest monster truck series in the world. It was basically, some people say it's the prime of monster trucks, some people don't. Some people, including myself, agree it's the like mid to late 2010s and mid 2000s, excuse me, to the late 2010s, and I would agree with that. Or mid 2010s, I would agree with that. But in terms of monster truck racing, you can't get much faster within the Panda Point series. These trucks were insanely quick. You can see the footage I'm putting on here. These things went like rockets off the line and just booking it to the finish as fast as they could in these straight lines with crush cars. It was absolutely insane to watch. Now, the Panda Point series ending in 1997, what's now known as Monster Jam then kind of took over and came to the fold. But back then, it was just basically known as the US HRA series. It was just a bunch of things. It wasn't just Monster Jam. It was monster trucks. It was mud drags. It was a bunch of other things within the show. But that's when Modern Monster Jam came to be, and it's around this time where freestyle first got introduced. Not as a competition, just as its own like encore, kind of like after the show, where two trucks would go and freestyle and just kind of mess around a little bit after the show, after the quote-unquote real show, which is the racing. Now, Monster Jam in the early 2000s is the start of Monster Jam as we know it now. It dropped the USHRA name and became known as Monster Jam. And this is when freestyle got its own scored competition as well. It was very controversial at the time, but I won't get too much into that. I'll leave Monster Talk's video about Monster Jam controversies. It goes into a little bit more detail there about it, about the whole freestyle thing. And so basically, it was just racing and freestyle now, what we slowly come to know. Now, the tracks weren't super insane just yet. They were big, and they started to finally get in their own. It was basically their infancy stage of what would slowly go into the prime of Monster Jam. Now, we're going to get into what I consider and what most people consider the prime of Monster Jam, which is basically 2007-ish to 2015, 2016. And this is where everything was just clicking. They had insane jumps and obstacles. The racing was fantastic. They had some of the best drivers in the history of the sport in Dennis Anderson, Tom Mintz, Adam Anderson, Ryan Anderson, Lindsey Wigg, Jimmy Creighton, Jim Kohler. And that's just off the top of my head. I can keep going on. They also had very creative tracks as well. Something you wouldn't see every day. One of my personal favorites shows, period, it was San Diego, I believe. San Diego 2009. Where it was just basically this massive dirt mound in the middle of the stadium with jumps all around it. And it was something that we haven't really seen before. And we got some of the coolest moments from Monster Jam with that jump. Mainly Tom Mintz sending it and then flipping violently after snapping his wheel off and basically exploding the truck. Now, Monster Jam's decline started around 2016, 2017. Where they slowly start to get rid of the crush cars less and less, and the tracks slowly seem to be less creative and more just kind of copy paste, and it slowly became something that was a far reach of what its prime and where it started initially. It's a far cry from where it used to be, and it was introduced with a bunch of things, fan judging. There was also the two-wheel skills that came in later on, which it's kind of hated, but at least not hated, more mixed feelings on, which I have as well. I have mixed feelings on it. But yeah, it's far from what it used to be during that point, and it was looking fairly dark, honestly, especially after that Manchester show, I believe 2017, 2018, 2019, around there, where they had no dirt at all, and which was no big deal because in the past, in arena shows, and the Thunder National series, which is a whole different thing, kind of a whole different thing. I'll leave a link to the video in the description as well about the Thunder Nationals. they would run on concrete, and that's just fine because they just had the crush cars in the van stack in the middle, and then there you go. There's your track, and it works. But in 2017, Monster Jam discontinued crush cars, so it ended up being one of if not the worst Monster Jam show of all time, because whenever it was basically just concrete blocks with like tires as the jumps and as the obstacles. So it was really, really underwhelming. And if you look up a bunch of shows, a bunch of show reviews, excuse me, about the single Manchester show, it is a disaster. Like, people were saying it's the worst show of all time, and it was a big waste of money, and it really hurt Monster Jam's reputation in the moment there. So yeah, it wasn't very good. It wasn't looking very good for quite a while. Okay, now that we got the abridged history of monster trucks and Monster Jam and how it got to the said decline and during its prime and all that, now I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into why it's no longer the same anymore. And the first thing is one of the most talked about things, except for the next we're probably going to talk about afterwards. But probably one of the most talked about things has been fan judging.
All right, I get it. I'm just so darn bored.
Well, find a way to entertain yourself. For 5 minutes. Could you not be
making shitty decisions?
For 5 minutes!
Especially in modern times with things like thejudgeszone.com. Now, initially, there were a bunch of judges, like professional judges, that would travel around with all the drivers and with the circuit to judge shows. And to be fair, they would occasionally make a couple mistakes, but it wasn't every single event. It was very, very rare. And there were times where, like, you can see a truck win that you would understandably, you can see deserves the win, but you might disagree with it because you can see another truck that could have won. But now with stuff like this, judgesfanzone.com, you sometimes see trucks that don't deserve the win getting the win, and instead of talking about, okay, this drive deserved the win, but this one also deserved it, you see this one didn't deserve the win, or this one could have won it, but this one didn't deserve it, and stuff like that. And the reason for that is because with the judgeszone.com we have now, it is basically everybody in the stands can vote. And what hurts it sounds like a good idea on paper, but what hurts it is that us fans are naturally biased to our favorite trucks. It's just natural. It's who we are as fans of the sport. We all have our favorite driver. We all have our favorite truck. But it's not, that's why we shouldn't be judging, because we're naturally going to overscore our favorite trucks. For example, one of the shows that just passed, it was Arlington. Ryan Anderson in Son of a Digger pulled off like an insane save that was only 3 hits in. And back in the day, back in like early 2010s, like it would have gotten a low score because he only did 3 hits before his run was done. Granted, he could have kept going back there, but that's something I'll get into much later. But it could have been something like for examples purposes. Let's just say it happened and he got completely shut off and he couldn't go again, which is what happened. Instead of getting the win, which is what ended up happening, he would have finished near the back, if not last. He probably would have gotten maybe a 9, a 10 back then. And that sounds good by today's standards because, he could have gotten like a 9.821 or whatever the new scoring is. But But back then it was from 0 to 30 or 0 to 40. So back then that was right near the bottom, and that's what should have happened. But instead, because it was Ryan Anderson, Son of a Digger, and that's one of, if not the most popular truck out there. It's not the most, it's probably Gravedigger or Max D. That is Maximum Destruction. That's what they also get into. That is the most popular. The fact that there was an insane move that ended up carrying the whole run, which is fine. Like, you can have a move carry like a wow factor that does the run, but having it the only thing in the run is not good. For example, if you go back to one of the best freestyles of all time, in my opinion, and my personal favorite freestyle of all time, it was Dennis Anderson and Gravedigger in Minneapolis 2007. He ended up going over the double, which is the double bus stack, getting some of the biggest air ever seen in a monster truck. That's kind of changed now due to the newer technology we have in the trucks. But at the time, that was the biggest air any truck's ever gotten, and he ended up, and that was like the main wow factor he had. But he also had great momentum. He had a bunch of great saves. He had some good different moves. He kept things fresh and he kept it going. He didn't stop until the final, until time ran out, and that was it. And rightfully earned, he got a 30 out of 30. And that was, I believe, rightfully deserved. But with Ryan Anderson's moment, he ended up flipping way too early, or not flipping. He made the save and then stopped because the RAI shut him down. Again, I'll get into that much later. He ended up getting the win because it's Ryan Anderson, Son of a Digger, and it was something that no one's really ever seen before, which is fine. Again, it's fine, but with the way judging is done now, it's not fair, because then everybody just thinks, oh my god, that was so cool, and it was like so in the moment that they just voted a 10 or voted like a 9 or an 8 or like really, really high, when in reality he should have been near the back. And if you see the footage, if you were there at the show, he said it himself immediately after that, because he was the last truck out, I believe. He went immediately after that, went to the microphone and said, I don't deserve this. Or I don't think I deserve that win. He said it himself.
That's exactly right. I'm not going to lie. I didn't deserve that win. There was many, many good freestyles that were awesome. I know that was crazy because I couldn't even tell
that he didn't think he deserved to win that. So that just shows how the judging is affected and how much worse it's gotten over the years, unfortunately. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just complain about things and not give my own opinions on it and how we can fix it. So what we can do is either go back to the way judging used to be with the professional judges following them around the circuit, or, which is something that could actually be done, I think it's been done in the last World Finals, I think it worked pretty well, and that is having fan judging alongside the professional judges. Now, if you really need to keep fan judging, or you really, really want to keep it just to keep the fans engaged, keep judgezone.com, but average out the scores between the professionals and the fans. Average out the scores, and then from there, that's a lot more of a balanced take on the final score that the drivers would get. And I feel like it could fix this problem. It's a pretty simple fix, and I think that's something that could really be looked into by Feld and Monster Jam as a whole. But yeah, I think that could be something that could work pretty well in the future, I think. The next thing is about the tracks and crush cars specifically. And There's besides the judging is the most talked about problem with Monster Jam, so I'm not gonna dwell too much on this. You've probably heard it a bunch of times before. Tracks are boring, no crush cars, blah 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 blah. Okay, so I'm gonna give my quick thing into it, and something a little bit different that I don't see talked about that much. I've only seen one other YouTuber talk about this. It was, so we'll go first the tracks and the crush car and that whole crush car thing. So I've seen a really good video by Monster Jam California. I will leave this video in the description because it's an absolute fantastic watch. He goes into detail about why crush cars are slowly being phased out. And I watched it and it makes sense to me. Like, it makes sense why they slowly phased it out. It was getting too expensive, and yeah, and they didn't want to bother cleaning up after the show. But there's my thing. Monster Jam is a massive corporation. Feld Entertainment is literally owned by billionaires. So I feel like having the whole crush car thing being, oh, it's too expensive, when you see independent shows like Monster Truck Throwdown, Toughest Monster Truck Tour, even Hot Wheels Monster Trucks Live, they all have crush cars and they could afford to have crush cars constantly. I feel like that kind of makes it seem like Feld's kind of lazy and they don't want to stay behind and clean up afterwards, which is, again, I get. And cars aren't built the same way. Again, link in the video for Monster Jam California, but he makes a really good point where monster trucks are meant to hit like a little more solid objects, and cars in the 70s were really bad, and they were like, but they had that really good steel frame behind it. They had a really good steel frame where it wouldn't just give away right now. It was made of all like steel frame, steel panels, everything was steel, and it held together relatively well. But in modern times, with the new cars we have, the crush cars from like the 2010s, where it has a lot more give to it. Because back in, I guess, in the 70s, safety wasn't really a major concern. It was basically an afterthought, if it was thought of at all.
The car is a fragile thing, even at moderate speeds, and so are its occupants.
So, but now with the cars in the 2010s and early 2000s that are now getting crushed, they have a lot more symbolism on safety and giving way to absorb most of the impact. So the crush cars crush a lot more, and they end up producing a lot more debris, which is what they don't want to clean up. Feld, I believe they don't want to clean up. And I know I've heard people say that, oh, it's because of the Tacoma incident in 2009. But here's my whole take on that. First of all, it's a tragic incident that was super unfortunate to happen. But there was really nothing anybody could have done. They had all the proper safety things like in place, and it didn't even come from said crush cars or anything. What happened was, I believe it was the drive shaft broke off Natural High, or previous truck ended up in the dirt, and then Natural High ran over it, and then it went flying into the stands and unfortunately killed a 9-year-old boy. But let's be honest here. The odds of that happening are very, very low. And there have been incidences of things flying into the stands after that as well, but no one's gotten hurt or like minor injuries. No one's been killed, is my point. where it's come to the point where you got to keep in mind, this is a dangerous sport. Regardless, like, the drivers are strapped in, sure, but there's always risk involved in motorsport. If you go to a NASCAR race, you don't expect a car to fly into the fence and hurt you, but that risk is still there. If you go to F1 races or IndyCar races, or even something like the Bathurst, like V8 supercars or endurance race, you don't expect the car to like flip into the stands, or like a rogue tire to go into flying up into the stands and hit somebody. But even though you don't think about it, that risk is still there. See, it's something you should think about before you go to any motorsport, that something like that is never guaranteed to not happen. There can be as much safety as you need of whatever. That it's something that makes it inherently risky, which is why people are drawn to it. Like, it makes sense why people are drawn to it. It's really big. It's really big adrenaline to watch. You don't, because you don't see things every day. You don't see these super fast speed machines flying around circuits at 200 kilometers an hour. You don't see these massive, like, 2-ton monster trucks flying through the air and then, like, breakdancing in the dirt. Like, you don't see that every day. So it makes sense why the draw is there, but there's also that risk factor you gotta keep in the back of your head. Now, am I blaming anybody in this situation for not knowing that? No, I am not. All I am saying is that as a spectator, it's something that you have to kind of keep in the back of your head, that something can always happen. And no amount of safety can help that. That is a tragic fact. But that is why we love going to these shows. That's why we love going to Monster Jam. That's why we love going to NASCAR races. That's why we love going to F1 races. Because we love the adrenaline we get from being there. Don't even get me started on rally, because people there are literally inches away from the cars flying around. And even they know, though it's a little bit more apparent, but those fans know that they apparently hold a risk by being there. They risk their lives being there. And they still do it because they love the sport. So when it comes to the whole crush cars thing, and we don't want debris to fly into the stands and to clean up, it's something that it's gonna happen very rarely. It doesn't happen often. And it's tragic that it did have to happen at all to anybody. But it's just the inherent risk that comes with going to the sport. And as someone who's been to Monster Jam in 2009, 10, and 11, when they had all these crush cars, like, you could tell, like, I was only a kid, but I knew somewhat that it was still pretty dangerous being in the stands. But of course, my adrenaline and everything, my awestruckness was just going through the roof, and I didn't think about it, and I was just enjoying the show. So that's just something I think us as fans have to kind of get into our heads, that we are not 100% safe regardless of the debris and such going into the crowds. So that's my whole thing on the whole crush cars situation. But when it comes to tracks, it's a little bit different.
Go collect some Pokemon and change them into your favorite color.
Blue. Red.
Green is not a creative color.
Now, when it comes to tracks, the whole track situation, minus the crush car whole thing, which I just went on about, it's something that I have my own thing on, where I feel like now, tracks feel like they're just being copy pasted. They're just Cyclone, Hurricane, J-Hook. And then don't even get me started on it, because arenas pods have been the same since 2016. They've been the absolute same. They have not changed whatsoever. Meanwhile, so I'm putting up pictures now. You can see the differences between an arena show from like 2012, 2013, 2010, and then a modern day pod that's happened since 2016, where it's all just the same thing over and over again. And unless you're counting out Tacoma, and even that Tacoma still has roughly the same layout every year. It's all just the same. But back in the day, back in the Monster Jam's prime, it was, you had these insanely creative tracks that were being built, and some of the most insane looking things. Like as this previously, San Diego 2009. There was also, what was it? I think it was St. Louis 2009 as well. I think it had one of the most crazy obstacles, where it was like a massive pyramid of cars dug into dirt, and it was insane. It was the most insane looking thing. There were double stacks. There was bus stacks. There were RVs, campers. That's another thing they should bring back as well. But that kind of goes along with the crush car thing, and stuff like that. Where nowadays, like I said, it's just like these dirt J-hooks, dirt cyclone, dirt hurricane, and that's it. And I know back in the prime, it was mainly the racing style was mainly Chicago style, which I like personally. Chicago style is one of my favorites, other than probably Vegas style. But it made up for it. It made up for it in the fact that freestyle was completely different. It was a completely different track for freestyle. Like they stiffen up the racing lanes. They make those a little bit more steeper. They'd steepen up the racing lanes, but they'd also but then that's all they really needed to do, and then bring a couple more crush cars out for like wheelies and just in the corners, and then later on they bring out the RV, and they'd basically just that'd be it. That's all they needed to bring out, and then everything just went. The freestyle track, they had step ups, they had everything that was just completely and utterly bonkers. And one of the things that I miss about it is the intimidation factor, because nowadays, like, you don't get it, they're still really big and the obstacles are still really massive, but you kind of expect going to the same thing, like, oh, there's some dirt and that's about it. There's some bigger dirt ramps, there's some smaller dirt ramps, and that's about it. Like they're intimidating to an extent, but they're nowhere near as intimidating as things were back in the early days of the 2000s and 2010s, where you go to Monster Jam and you'd see these like absolute chaotic and massive ramps and things dug into the side of, and you think, what the hell are they gonna do with this? And I'm showing you some more examples of that now. Again, a great example of that is San Diego 2009 or Jacksonville 2010. Where you see these ramps that are just all over the place, and you think that there's no way that any of these guys can hit it, not with enough speed. And like, you just think these things are absolutely massive. Nowadays, like, you see, oh yeah, no, these are massive, but I saw these already, like, last week on TV that were, like, the exact same style. And if we say, yes, I know things are not as, they don't look as big on TV, but it's still the same track style on TV. The same, almost pretty much the same exact track style, the same, not track style, like track design as well, I should say. Where back in the day, like, you'd see, like, okay, it's still Chicago style racing, but what the fuck is that double stack doing in the middle of that, followed by this massive mound, like, that's over here that's gonna freaking cross thread. Like, there's so much other things that were possible to do, like, creatively back in the heyday, and I kind of wish they could bring it back. Now, the final thing I want to talk about track-wise is something that I don't see many people talking about. I guess I always saw one person talk about. It was the actual paint they use on the tracks. And how kind of boring they are now. For example, they had like back in it was Atlanta 2007, I believe, and that had like this massive green stack with like spiders and spider webs painted into the side of it, and they also had this beautiful blue bus stack that was like blue and yellow and zigzagged. It was one of those beautiful tracks. And then the greatest ever World Finals track and show, World Finals 9. It was like absolutely gorgeous with the amount of paints and designs they have. Like, look at these, for example. I have it on screen right now. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it made things so much different. But now, compared to what we have in modern days, it's basically just black dirt with said color of tour. Like, if it's the Stadium Series blue, it's just blue. Stadium Series red, it's just red. It's arena yellow, it's just yellow. Or whatever the arena colors they use. This for, again, examples. But the thing is, like, I get it, they have to keep it because it's the tour color, but they can still have some fun with it. For example, I kind of whipped up my own color scheme for a track here that's on screen now, that it has so much more not detail, but just like different different colors in it. It makes it pop out more. I feel like it makes it pop more. With the way the style looks now, it's just kind of like split between like gray and blue, gray and yellow, gray and red. But that is it. But I feel like there's so much more that they can use with. They have so much more that they can use it with, like track wise, and like design wise, track design wise, excuse me. And they're just not using it. They have I guarantee there's some great artists out there that would love to like design stuff like that. And they even did something really cool in Philadelphia 2011 where they had I think it was a whole school like come down and paint a crush car, and that was used in Monster Jam. Like, that is so creative. That is beautiful to get some fans involved, or create new fans as well by getting involved. And they're just not using that advantage anymore. It's because they're kind of held back by the said stadium colors. But as you saw my previous design that I quickly whipped up using my crude Photoshop skills and crude drawing skills, that like it's still possible to make cool designs and to not just like copy paste the same colors over and over again. Now, to fix the whole track situation, they're actually kind of doing it now, which I'm going to mention a little bit later on. But recently they've been adding different designs to the tracks, and they haven't used in this new season. Again, like this, like on this day, October 21st, 2023, they are in, I believe, Houston right now. That's a completely new track. They were in Arlington a few weeks ago, and Glendale. They were completely different tracks as well. Glendale and Arlington were a little bit similar, but the middle section, it was a little more steeper in Glendale than it was in Arlington. And that just shows you that I think they're slowly starting to like branch things out. I just hope that they keep switching it up and they don't like make it just for one series like over and over and over again, because I feel like that's gonna just be going right back to square one. But we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Another thing I see coming up pretty often, and something I agree with, is the whole RII situation with trucks breaking. Now, back in the day, they were able to almost completely break apart, and as long as they didn't lose the front axle, they were basically allowed to keep going as long as like the truck was still drivable.
I would submit
even though McDonald is at this elite level, one of the best in the game, you look at moves like this and huge air like that, he's still one of the most underrated freestylers out there. The fans are on their feet after that wild crash.
Well, he's not going to stop. It's just a three-legged bull. It's no big deal. Oh, look at this.
But for example, Tom Mintz in World Finals 8, he completely snapped his rear axle housing in half, and that's never happened before since, I don't think. And something like that, like, he still kept going for quite a little while, but there's not much he could have done, so he got shut off.
You're right, and that's what impresses the judges when you do things the others didn't. And he is on all out, but he needs to fill the clock. He's running awful big. Tom Mintz, and I think he's mad at himself, probably for being a little conservative. He's not being conservative here at all. Oh, what air!
Unbelievable air.
This guy is
Career
a trucker.
growth.
Unbelievable. That is an 8-year-old truck.
A truck and all the entire differential snapped in the middle. Never seen that.
He's still rolling. How much time is left on the clock?
But like nowadays, like, they would not let him keep going. And I feel like that's such a waste, because like drivers like Tom Mintz, Dennis Anderson, who is retired by now, but like his son Adam Anderson, Brian Anderson, and even some people who we haven't seen do stuff like John Zimmer Jr., Weston Anderson, Cole Vernard, Camden Murphy. Like, we don't know how they can run with broken trucks. And if you look back at some of those old shows, there were some moments where things were not possible with a fixed truck that they did with a broken truck. And I feel like that just shows the skill of the drivers, and we're just not leaning in to said skills of the drivers. And this kind of goes back to the whole Tacoma incident in 2009. But like I said before, we as fans are going to these shows with an inherent risk that we could get hurt. And again, there's not really much anyone can do to fix it. Again, as much safety as there is, nothing's stopping anything from going to the stands. Like who knows? Like, it's an inherent risk that we all have to take going to shows as fans. But there's just nothing. There's just something that, like, we need to fix, like, RI wise. And I've noticed this in Arlington. That Ryan Anderson save that he did with a flat tire. A couple of years ago, as soon as that tire went down, they were done. Like, they couldn't continue. And of course, everybody's seen that infamous video with Gravedigger losing a headlight and then getting shut off just so they could pick up the headlight and then he can continue. Like, stuff like that shouldn't be happening. But with previously mentioned Ryan Anderson moment in Arlington where he got shut off, but was allowed to keep going. Where he would have been shut off with the flat tire. He kept being able to keep going and then make that save. So I think the officials now are starting to, hopefully, they're starting to kind of lean off a little bit of the RII situation, and they'd only do it like when they get dangerously close to a wall, or they flip onto the wall, or they broke something and they need to check out, make sure it's still safe to drive, stuff like that. Because like that, it makes sense to me. Like, that is absolutely needed, and it's pivotal for driver safety and fan safety. That makes sense to me. But it's to the point now where it's almost overkill, and it feels like they're kind of coddling us as fans. And this is another thing that I'm gonna quickly mention. It feels like Monster is being too kiddish now as well, where like you see these trucks like Thunderorus, Bakugan, Dragonoid, and even the new Monster Musts with these whole like 3D bodies that like are good for toys, but they just feel like overly kiddish and over animated. Meanwhile, you go back in the day, you had the original Monster Mutt, you had stuff like Jurassic Attack, you had what else? They had like a bunch of simpler trucks, like even something like Backdraft was like really, really loved. And it's something that kind of bothers me because kids, like if you want to have a few trucks with 3D bodies, like if you want to keep Thunderorus around, or you want to keep the new monster bodies, sure. But kids also like seeing trucks that look like trucks. Like, I know Wild Side's a really good example of that. I know that has a Ford F-150, but a Ford F-150.
Voy a la playa, había subido la marea. Jesús. Jesús. Había subido la marea y encontré una paella. Y la encontré.
But that's the only body they really allow, because they only seem to run Fords now, and I feel like with stuff like Backdraft and Eradicator, the original Suzuki that was on the Chevy body, like stuff like that, like we need more manufacturers in the sport, I feel like, to make things look different, and make things a little bit less kiddish, because if we're kind of losing that core fan base, like we only have like a few major YouTubers that I can imagine that are diehards, are like Monster Talk, Avengers Racing, Monster Jam Lord, like stuff like that, people like that. But like, even though that's a dying breed, unfortunately, and without the core fan base, because keep in mind, core fan bases grow up, so it's kind of needed. But with that, you just keep catering to the kids. And it's not gonna go well for Monster Jam, and for reasons why I'll get to later. But back to the whole RII thing. Yeah, I feel like they're just coddling us, and they need to kind of like be a little bit more loose with the RII shutdowns. But they seem to be doing that, so let's hope they continue doing that. Okay, this video is getting quite long. As I'm recording this, I'm already 43 minutes in. I'm not sure how much of this I'm actually gonna keep, but I'm gonna try and do a quick little lightning round of some of the smaller stuff. Some of the small, like one more thing that I find that we need to kind of address, and that is the whole zoomies and driver customizations, like things with like the whole tires and everything. Now, for zoomies and the louder exhaust that we have, unfortunately, they've gone kind of by the way of the dodo bird, where you only see them at international shows, independent shows. I am studying all of my stuff because I'm trying to get this done quick. Because I want to get it to editing and the audio and editing the video together. But there were times back in the day where, and I can address to this because I went to Toronto in 2009, 10, and 11, where these monster trucks would basically blow your eardrums out. For lack of a better term, they just blow your ears out, and that is just awesome to me. Like it blew your ears out, and you felt it in your chest. You felt it like all throughout. You rattled your bones. Now, I cannot say for sure because I have not gone recently to the recent Monster Jam shows. I'm gonna be honest with you, but from what I've been told and what I've heard, they're not as loud, and they still rattle your bones, but not as much as the zoomies once did, like echoing throughout the stadium. And that's kind of sucks to me because I kind of like when you go to a Monster Truck show, you kind of expect to get the whole like smell the gasoline, smell the dust getting kicked up, smell like, and like hear the engines absolutely blow your eardrums out. Look at the trucks do like these incredible stunts where like you basically want this like super like overload of senses of just amazing and adrenaline. But with the new MagnaFlows, it just doesn't happen, and that's okay. Like if drivers want to run MagnaFlows, let them run MagnaFlows. That's 100% okay with me. It's not my thing, but they should be. If drivers want to be allowed to run MagnaFlows, they should be allowed to. That being said, if someone wants to run zoomies or another type of exhaust or another type of tires, but I'll get into that a little bit later, they should be allowed to, exhaust-wise at least. Now, tires are a little bit different because Monster Jam is actually sponsored by BKT, and they kind of run the whole thing, which makes sense. But I feel like if you go back in the day, there were a bunch of other tire brands. There were Ukraines, there were SIRs, there were Firestones, there were Goodyears, there were also whatever the hell Lampiso drove. As you can see, you can see the differences between the tires, and as you can see at Alan Pizzo's, he cut them weird, but that's how he liked it, and that's what made Predator. Like, it's what made these trucks different. Now, if it's Farrell-owned trucks, and they have to have BKTs, that's okay with me. Like, if it's Farrell, they're on the contract, fine, whatever. I can let that slide. But with some of the independents like Overboard, Wildside, Black Pearl, Avenger, like Brutus, they should be allowed to run whatever they want. Like, they should be able to run SIRs, they should be able to run Goodyears, they should be able to run Firestones, they should be able to run whatever they want. But that's something that has to be kind of dealt with in the future, because Monster Jam has a long-term contract in BKT, and that I don't see changing anytime soon. So hopefully in the future, that's something that could be like a possibility. But as of now, that at least in the near future, that does not seem like it's gonna happen, unfortunately. At least tire-wise. But the whole the whole exhaust situation, that I feel like should be looked into a little bit, because I feel like it would be a lot more like it'd just be a lot better, like sensory wise, for the fans in the stands.
First time?
Yeah, you?
No, not my first time.
Now, I'm going to compare Monster Jam to NASCAR now, where Monster Jam kind of reminded me of NASCAR right now. How NASCAR was a few years ago, it was, ratings were going down, it was basically going all to hell. Nothing was going good for NASCAR at the time. The fans in the audience weren't showing up, fans on TV weren't watching, it was, sponsors were leaving left and right, it was just going really, really bad. But in the last few years, they've been doing some good. They've been, for example, they've been going back to the core audiences. They've dropped Texas from the schedule. They dropped a day at Golden North Wilkesboro now. They brought back dirt racing. They're going back to what made NASCAR. They left the core audience back in Wilkes County back in 1996 or 1997, I think. And they kind of left them high and dry for the expansion of NASCAR. For Las Vegas, for Texas, for Fontana, for and like for Phoenix, stuff like that. Actually, no, not Phoenix. Phoenix was on schedule for a little while before that. But the point is, they realized their mistakes and they went back to their core audience. And look what's happened to North Wilkesboro. North Wilkesboro was all but not forgotten, but all but lost. And they came back thanks to a bunch of, granted, like, perfect storms. But perfect storms regardless, they still went through and it ended up working. And ended up being a big net boost for NASCAR, because now they're going back to their roots. In 2003, they almost left Darlington, but they didn't. Granted, it was because of that insane fishing, Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch, but that's besides the point. They stayed and ended up staying in Darlington, and now Darlington's like, I believe, is like the big whole throwback weekend, like massive thing that everybody loves. And it's like the oldest track on the schedule, like prior to North Wilkesboro coming back. And it was just, it's something that NASCAR is slowly starting to do. They're slowly starting to go back to their core audience. And that's something that Monster Jam needs to do. I feel like if Monster Jam slowly went back to what made Monster Jam back in the early 2010s and early mid to late 2000s, where it was like that's where they got their core fan base. Granted, as kids, but they also had the previous fan base in like the early 2000s and from the 90s. What they kept that core fan base there, but now everyone's all but gone now, and now you just have like a couple of diehards, like myself and a couple of my friends and a couple others, like who go to shows and such, and like who create content, who love, like, talk about, who collect all the collectors, all the content creators, all the actual like people who go to stadiums, like the diehard fans. That's all that's left. But the actual core fan base, they left them back in like 2020, not 2020, excuse me, 2016, 2017, where it was just a far cry from what Monster Jam once was. And with the whole two-wheel skills thing, which I'm gonna quickly bring back, it's something that I feel like is a good idea, but shouldn't be done at every show. I feel like it should be done its own separate thing, like every couple shows, sure, but not every show. But that's just me, because it can get kind of boring at times that they just do the same things over and over again with like moonwalks and such. Like, but that's just kind of me, my opinion. If you think I'm completely wrong, you're entitled to that opinion. And that's I'm not going too deep in it, because it's not really much of a fix for that whole situation. That's just like the natural evolution of the sport, and people are gonna have to get used to it, and that's okay. I'm slowly getting used to dual skills myself. But the thing is, the whole core fan base, it's just not there anymore. Like, it's very like there's just a handful of people left from that core fan base, and we need that core fan base if we want the sport to improve. And I feel like now with Monster Jam leading too much of the kids' direction, I feel like it's not going well. Like, it's doomed if we continue going in this whole kiddie direction, and it's just not gonna be what it should be, how it was back in the early 2000s and early 2010 and 2010s, mid to late 2000s and 2010s, early 2010s, where it was kids would love it naturally because it's these massive like colorful machines flying through the air and crashing and flipping and doing insane saves, insane moves, and really really loud. But adults also liked it because they didn't feel like they were being childish by being there. It was literally like fun for the whole family. Now it doesn't feel like it's fun for the whole family. It feels like it's fun for kids who bring their family. It's fun for kids who bring their family, or who beg their parents to beg their family to go with them. But back in the day, in the 90s as well, it was something that kids and adults could love equally. Where now it feels like kids are being pandered to, and adults are just kind of there to be there just to like watch the kids, really. That's just kind of my own take on that. So, but here's the things. Here's some things that that Monster Jam can take away from NASCAR quickly. That they need to just get the core fan base back, slowly go back to the way things used to be with the whole RII situation, which they're doing, and the track situation, which they might be doing. We're still not sure yet, but they might be doing that. And which are two bright sides, by the way. That's the shining glimmer of hope and the dark tunnel that they have. It's not over yet, and we just need to make our voices heard, and hopefully, it's in a perfect world that they will listen to us, and we can they'll go back to what originally made Monster Jam great, with obviously some like modern tweaks, including like two-wheel skills in there, because that would actually be really cool to see. But only time will tell, unfortunately. And we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, about all that. It's come out today. I'm recording this a good few weeks into editing, so it's why it's kind of rushed. It just came out that in the next World Finals at SoFi Stadium, there will be no encore. Now, I don't know if that means there's nothing planned currently and that there will be one later. That's what I'm hoping for. But if there isn't an encore, I could be wrong. I could have jinxed it in the past. Monster Jam could be going right down the shitter. That I do not know. It's yet to be seen. Let's cross our fingers and hope that it just means that there's no current there's no encore plan currently, but they're working on it. Let's just hope it's that, because if there is no encore, this is not what we want. This is not what we mean by we want it to go back to the way they were. The last time there was no encore was back all the way in World Finals 1 in 2000. Every single year after that, there's been an encore, and it's been consistently an encore. So hopefully, that ends up happening, and we end up getting an encore, and we do not end up with no encore, because what I just said about Monster Jam improving, pretty much all of it can go right down the drain. Why do I always jinx things?
Anyways, thanks guys so much for watching this video. I'm sorry it was so long. It's just kind of one of these rant videos I wanted to make for quite a while now. I might make more, I might not. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will see you guys in the next video. Hopefully I can actually post this. This is gonna be a bitch to edit, but hopefully I can finish this relatively quick, and I'll get it out to you guys as soon as possible. I'm not sure when, but yeah, I'll get it out to you guys as soon as possible. And yeah, I love all you guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the flip side.